Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is to take a look at, well, a really massive regulatory push coming out of Australia. It's definitely captured the attention of governments, tech companies, and, frankly, parents everywhere.
That's right. We're digging into Australia's planned ban on social media access for kids under 16. It's formalized through their online safety amendment, and it's set to kick in on December 10th. 2025.
Yeah, and this is huge, globally significant, really, because it fundamentally challenges the way almost every major Web 2.0 platform operates, their whole business model.
Exactly.
And look, the intent behind this legislation, it's clearly commendable. I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to argue against the goal, right? The government wants to protect youth mental health, tackle cyberbullying much more aggressively, and really cut down on the harmful stuff minors get exposed to.
Absolutely necessary goals. And they're backing it up with serious teeth, too. We're talking about fines for non-compliance that could hit, $50 million to the big tech players?
Huge numbers. So that shared goal protecting kids, that's the starting point for this deep dive. It's something everyone seems to agree on.
Right. But this is where the source material we looked at gets really interesting. It doesn't offer a moral critique. Everyone agrees protecting kids is vital. Instead, it's, let's call it an architectural critique.
Architectural, meaning the way the platforms are built.
Precisely. The core dilemma isn't if we should protect young users, but how. The big question raised is just banning access to the current platforms, the endless feeds, the engagement metrics, all that Web 2.0 stuff. Is that the right solution? Or does doing that just accept a fundamentally flawed blueprint to begin with?
Okay, I see. That's the tension we're exploring then. On one side, you've got this strong political will, massive fines driving change. But on the other side, you have tech experts, critics, people looking at the underlying structure saying, hold on, this solution, well, it just won't work. It's trying to police a system that's almost designed not to be policed effectively.
You've hit the nail on the head. The policy is strong, yes, but the architecture it's trying to control is inherently weak, or rather inherently resistant to this kind of control.
So the conversation really needs to shift.
Yeah.
Beyond just saying no to kids using these things.
Absolutely. It has to move beyond simple prohibition and start focusing on design philosophy. And what's great about the sources we're drawing on is they don't just point fingers at the problems with a ban. They actually provide a pretty comprehensive blueprint for, maybe the next generation of online spaces.
Okay, so what's that blueprint?
We're going to get into the shift towards something called microsocial networks, MSNs, and how they can be built using a really sophisticated framework called web4.community. It's all about building safety from the ground up through intentional design.
Got it. But before we get to the solution, we really need to unpack that first step. Why exactly is a straightforward ban, even with the best intentions, likely doomed to fail? Both technologically and, it seems, ethically, too. Okay, so Australia's mandate is clear. Keep under 16s off the big social platforms. Simple enough on paper. But, implementing that requires rock-solid age verification, right? And the big companies, Google, Meta, they immediately flagged huge practical problems. What are the really deep technological limits here?
Yeah, the mandate basically forces platforms into relying heavily on AI-driven age estimation. And the fundamental problem is the entire legal mechanism hangs on that technology being near perfect, which it isn't.
Right, because if the system has holes, if kids can get through, then the law itself doesn't actually achieve what it set out to do.
Exactly. And the research we looked at, including a government commission report from the Age Check Certification Scheme, it confirms this. It lays it out pretty starkly. There is no single universally effective or, crucially, 100% accurate solution out there right now. None.
So that brings us to what the source material called the buffer zone problem. That sounds like the real weak link in AI verification.
It really is the critical failure point. Let's break it down.
So if the legal age cutoff is 16, where does the tech stumble? What's this buffer zone?
It's all about how accuracy degrades right around that legal threshold. You see, facial recognition, other AI tools, they might claim pretty high accuracy, maybe, say, 92% when telling apart a definite adult from, a 10-year-old. That's a big difference.
Sure, that seems achievable.
But reliability just plummets when the task is much harder. Distinguishing between, say, a 14-year-old and an 18-year-old. Or even a 15-and-a-half-year-old and a 16-and-a-half-year-old. That critical 2 to 3 year window right around the age of 16, That's where accuracy falls off a cliff.
Because teenagers change so rapidly, their faces, their features, the AI just can't keep up with that level of precision needed for a legal boundary.
That's exactly it. Adolescents are developing fast. They look different month to month sometimes. The AI models, they just lack the consistent precision needed to act as a legal firewall in that specific age range.
And that leads to what? Problems on both sides.
Yeah, inevitable regulatory failure and a lot of user frustration. You get a high rate of false positives, meaning legitimate users, maybe 16 or 17 years old. They get blocked because the AI wrongly flags them as younger. Imagine the frustration.
Okay, yeah, annoying. But maybe acceptable if it keeps younger kids out.
But you also get high rates of false negatives. That's the bigger failure from the law's perspective. Kids under 16 manage to slip through because the system overestimates their age. So you just can't maintain that near-perfect accuracy needed right where it matters most in that buffer zone. The restriction becomes leaky, ineffective.
And it doesn't stop just at technical accuracy, does it? The research pointed to a really troubling ethical dimension, too. Something about bias.
Yes, and this is a critical ethical failure highlighted in the sources. Some trial runs of age verification software, well, they showed signs of inherent racial bias. Meaning the technology might systematically misidentify people from specific demographic groups more often than others. So imagine if it disproportionately blocks legitimate users of color, or maybe it lets underage kids from certain backgrounds through more easily just based on things like skin tone or facial features analyzed by the AI.
Wow. So a law designed for universal protection could actually end up creating new inequalities, applying unfairly.
Precisely. You risk enshrining new layers of inequity right into the enforcement mechanism. It could fail the very groups it might have been most intended to help.
Okay, so the tech is shaky, potentially biased. But even if we magically fix that, there's another huge structural risk the sources flagged. You mentioned catastrophic privacy risks from centralized identity checks?
Yeah.
That sounds ominous.
It really is. This feels like the ultimate terrible trade-off. You're essentially asked to sacrifice fundamental privacy rights for what might only be an illusion of safety.
How so? Why is privacy the cost?
Because of the burden of proof the legislation puts on the platforms. To legally satisfy a government mandate that they prove a user's age, they're basically forced to demand, and then store incredibly sensitive identity data.
Like what kind of data?
We're potentially talking government-issued documents, passports, driver's licenses, maybe birth certificates, dates of birth, obviously, possibly even biometric data like face scans used for verification. For millions of adolescents, there's really no other way for them to meet that legal burden of proof within the current way these platforms are built.
And collecting all that sensitive data in one place, that leads to this data honeypot idea.
Exactly. A data honeypot is, well, it's like putting all your most valuable jewels in one big, obvious, maybe not so secure vault. Centralizing the full identification profiles, names, dates of birth, ID numbers, maybe biometrics of millions of teenagers creates an absolutely massive, incredibly tempting target for cybercriminals.
And unlike, say, a stolen credit card number, which you can cancel.
Right. Compromised identity documents, especially for young people who probably aren't monitoring their credit history closely, that can lead to devastating long-term identity fraud. Years, even decades later, it's concentrating the highest value, most sensitive data in what could become the most attackable place.
And for listeners in Australia, this isn't just theoretical, is it? The sources explicitly connect this risk to major data breaches that happened recently.
Yes, that connection is vital context. The huge breaches at Medibank and Optus demonstrated very clearly that even large organizations, companies that should have sophisticated cybersecurity, struggle immensely to protect large, centralized data sets.
So the argument is, if they struggle,
then mandating that global social media platforms whose main business, let's be honest, is advertising, not ultra-secure data vault management, suddenly become the official guardians of every Australian child's most sensitive identity documents. Well, you're effectively ordering the creation of the country's biggest, most vulnerable data target.
It really highlights how the law, aimed at protecting kids from online harm, could inadvertently expose them to a completely different, potentially life-altering risk: identity theft.
It's a profound mismatch. Trying to solve a very modern digital problem using arguably outdated regulatory thinking that doesn't account for these architectural vulnerabilities.
Okay, so we have tech failures, ethical issues, massive privacy risks. What about the immediate impact, the behavioral consequences? The sources mentioned a perverse incentive.
Yes, Google, talking specifically about YouTube, made this point very clearly. Think about it. If a child is legally blocked from using their regular, managed, logged-in account, do they just shrug and put down their phone?
Unlikely.
Highly unlikely. They are powerfully motivated to find a way around the restriction, and that usually means accessing content without logging in, or maybe using VPNs, different browsers, creating anonymous accounts, becoming essentially unaccounted for.
And the instant they become unaccounted for, they lose the safety features that were already there.
Bingo. That's the core of the uncurated consumption problem. Logged-in accounts, even for minors, often have some filters, some age restrictions applied. And crucially, they're often linked to parental management tools that can monitor usage, maybe restrict certain search terms.
So if the kid bypasses the login,
they lose all those structural safeguards. Poof, gone. They're pushed into a digital experience that is far more toxic, completely unfiltered, and demonstrably more dangerous than the one they had before the ban was put in place. The prohibition itself inadvertently dismantles the existing, albeit imperfect, safety nets.
So the law isn't eliminating the desire for connection or content. It's just pushing it somewhere else, somewhere potentially worse.
That's the inevitable displacement effect. It's pretty much a certainty based on behavioral science. The sources are very clear on this. A restrictive ban doesn't make the human desire for social interaction or information magically disappear. Instead, it just drives users, especially determined teenagers, into digital environments where oversight is minimal or even non-existent. Think unmonitored private Discord servers, fringe platforms with zero content moderation or reporting, highly encrypted group chats where anything goes.
So instead of a big visible platform like YouTube or Instagram, which has some corporate liability, some transparency, some moderation, the user gets pushed into the digital equivalent of a dark alley, a private, locked room.
That's a good analogy. Places where the risk of exposure to really extreme content, misinformation, hate speech, even grooming tactics increases dramatically because there's just no visibility or accountability.
It really feels like the prohibition fails because it's targeting the brand names, the big Web 2.0 players, instead of tackling the underlying architectural problems that allow harmful stuff to spread in the first place.
Correct. It forces users into environments that are often specifically designed to evade detection and oversight. And this comprehensive failure of the prohibition model, while it leads us directly to the alternative the research proposes, focusing on intentional design.
Okay, this is where things start to get really interesting, shifting from restriction to actual construction. The research argues we need to stop trying to patch up the sinking ship of Web 2.0 and start building something fundamentally different. So let's define these micro-social networks, or MSNs. What are they at their core?
Fundamentally, an MSN is just different. It's not trying to be a giant public square for billions of people built for endless growth and viral chaos. Think of it more like a controlled, purposeful digital community space.
Like a digital version of a real-world place.
Exactly. The best analogy is probably a strictly governed physical space with a clear purpose and membership, like a specific classroom's online portal, or a verified sports team's communication channel, or maybe a dedicated safe-by-design online learning center for a specific program. They're designed to be small, specialized, and defined by their intent.
So the safety isn't achieved by trying to filter an ocean of random content, but by designing the perimeter, the walls of the space, so only beneficial, defined interactions can even happen inside.
Precisely. It's safety by intentional design. We stop trying to, boil the ocean or filter the entire internet, and instead we start building smaller, safer swimming pools with locked gates and lifeguards.
Okay, I like that. So the source material outlines some key pillars for how these MSNs achieve this inherent safety. What's the first one?
The first pillar is absolutely crucial. It's the main structural difference. Small, closed user loops.
Closed loops, meaning not open to everyone.
Exactly. Membership isn't open to the world. It's highly restricted and clearly defined. We're talking about networks made up only of, say, the verified students within one specific school district, or maybe the registered participants in a recognized after-school coding club, or the members of a certified youth mental health support group run by professionals.
So if you're not verifiably part of that specific group, you simply can't get in.
Correct. You can't even see inside. This immediately cuts off the vast majority of risks associated with mass platforms, the anonymous trolls, the random exposure to harmful content, the bad actors searching for vulnerable targets.
That alone would dramatically change the feel of online interaction. If everyone inside is known, or at least verified within a specific context, accountability becomes sort of baked in. Okay, what's pillar 2? Governance.
Pillar 2 focuses on human-centric governance and moderation. This is a massive shift from Web 2.0.
How so?
Well, in today's big platforms, the algorithm is king, right? It drives engagement, decides what you see, often prioritizes sensationalism. Human moderation is mostly reactive. It usually only steps in after harm has happened and someone flags it.
Yeah, it always feels like playing catch-up.
Exactly. In an MSN, the model is flipped. The rules are transparent, specific to that community, and they're proactively enforced by known, verified human moderators. These are often the educators, the coaches, the program staff, the adults already responsible for that group in the real world.
And the algorithm.
The algorithm, if there even is one for content sorting, is completely subservient to human judgment and the community's ethical rules. Its job isn't to maximize clicks, it's to support the well-being and the specific goals, educational, creative, whatever they may be, of that particular group.
Okay, let me push back slightly here, because I can imagine a listener thinking this. Isn't relying on human moderators, who are often already stretched-thin teachers or volunteer coaches, just shifting the burden? Taking the liability from billion-dollar tech companies and dumping it onto under-resourced schools or community groups? What happens if moderation fails in one of these small loops?
That's a really fair and necessary question. The research addresses this, and the key is that the liability is manageable precisely because the loops are small and the context is known.
How does scale make it manageable?
Think about it. On a global platform, a single human moderator might be dealing with thousands of random, contextless reports from strangers every single day. It's an impossible task. In an MSN, the moderator is often an adult who already knows the users, maybe a teacher supervising their class of 30, or a coach managing their team of 50.
Okay.
And the rules aren't generic community guidelines. They're specific, like rules for the debate club forum or code of conduct for the summer art project group. Because the community is smaller, more accountable, and the moderator knows the context, they can be much more proactive. They're not just reacting to flags, they're often part of the ongoing interaction. The risk of catastrophic failure is lower because the scale and the relationships are fundamentally different.
That makes sense. The context is key. Okay, Pillar 3 seems like maybe the most radical change from how things work now.
Yeah.
The non-monetary model.
Yeah, this is really the architectural heart of the solution, the non-monetary model. MSNs must avoid the whole business model based on advertising and maximizing user engagement at all costs.
So, how do they get funded?
Typically through things like institutional subscriptions, a school district paying for its students, or maybe grants for specific educational programs, or even direct, transparent payments from parents or schools for a premium service.
And because there's no financial incentive tied to keeping eyeballs glued to the screen for ads.
The entire incentive to design manipulative, addictive features just evaporates. There's no reason to create an infinite scroll, no need to promote sensationalist or divisive content just because it gets more clicks. The platform's focus inherently shifts from maximizing ad impressions to maximizing actual utility or learning outcomes for the users.
So the whole incentive structure gets flipped on its head. If the platform is paid to serve the user's goals rather than to sell the user's attention to advertisers, that changes everything.
Absolutely everything. The developer's objective changes from how do we keep them scrolling for hours to how do we help them finish their assignment efficiently and log off feeling accomplished. It's intrinsically anti-addiction by design.
That's powerful. Okay, and the final pillar, Pillar 4.
Pillar 4 is about purpose-driven content. This builds on the previous point. Every feature, every tool within an MSN is ideally dedicated to a specific, defined purpose.
Like
Collaborative learning on a school project, or sharing progress on a creative writing assignment, or coordinating activities for a sports team, or participating in a structured mental wellness program. It's not a dumping ground for generic viral videos, memes, or endless status updates aimed at getting mass validation through likes.
So the design itself limits the type of content that thrives there.
Exactly. By focusing the platform on a specific function, you inherently exclude a lot of the toxicity, the misinformation, the comparison culture, and the sheer overwhelming noise that plagues platforms designed for maximum generic viral distribution.
Okay, so MSNs sound promising: safer loops, human oversight, no ad-driven addiction model, focused content. But we still have that original hurdle that tripped up the Australian ban. How do you actually verify who belongs in these loops, especially verifying age, without demanding passports and creating those privacy nightmares?
Ah, yes. And this is where the technology underpinning these MSNs becomes crucial. This leads us directly into the web4.community framework, the architectural blueprint that makes this possible.
Right. The source material calls the web4.community framework the sort of ultimate blueprint.
Yeah.
How does this specific architecture solve those twin problems of verification and addiction that plagued the Australian ban attempt?
Okay, so web4.community is really about leveraging newer, often decentralized technologies to solve the problems created by centralized Web 2.0 systems. Specifically for verification, it uses advanced cryptography to prove things without revealing sensitive data, completely avoiding the need to create those dangerous central honeypots.
Okay, let's dive into that first pillar, inherent age and identity assurance. How does this model do verification while actually protecting the privacy that the Australian law seemed ready to sacrifice?
The key concept here is decentralized verification. It's a fundamental shift. Instead of the platform taking on the liability of verifying and storing proof of age, we shift that burden. We rely on trusted third-party entities that already know the user to simply attest to a necessary fact about the user cryptographically without the user having to hand over their actual documents to the social platform itself.
Okay, attest cryptographically.
Yeah.
This sounds like where zero-knowledge proofs or ZKPs come in.
Yeah.
That term came up a lot in the research. We probably need to spend a minute unpacking that.
Yes, absolutely. ZKP is the cryptographic engine that makes this privacy-preserving verification possible. It's a fascinating type of protocol.
So how does it work? In simple terms, if possible.
Okay, imagine it less like showing your ID card and more like solving a complex riddle that only someone with the right information could solve. A zero-knowledge proof allows one party, let's call them the prover, to convince another party, the verifier, that a certain statement is true, but without revealing any of the underlying information or data used to prove it. The proof itself is mathematically solid and verifiable, but the knowledge, the sensitive data, remains completely secret.
Okay. Intriguing. Can you give us a concrete example? Let's stick with the 16-year-old trying to join a school-affiliated MSN. How would ZKP work there?
Perfect example. Let's use the school registrar. The school already knows the student's age. It's verified information they hold securely. Now, instead of the student having to scan and upload their passport or birth certificate to the MSN platform, the school registrar's system performs a cryptographic calculation using the student's verified age data. This calculation generates a unique, mathematically sound zero-knowledge proof. This ZKP essentially acts like a digital receipt that confirms only one specific statement. Yes, the individual associated with this request is verifiably over the age of 16, according to our records.
So the MSN platform, the verifier in this case, receives this cryptographic proof, the ZKP. It knows the statement is over 16, is true because the math checks out, and it trusts the source, the school registrar system. But crucially, the MSN platform never actually sees the student's date of birth, their address, their government ID number, nothing.
Exactly. It knows that the student meets the age requirement, but it has zero knowledge of the specific data proving it. The verification is achieved, the legal requirement potentially met, but the sensitive identity details never land on the social network's corporate servers.
Wow, okay.
And this directly enables the core principle of data integrity within the web4.community framework. The platform does not store or retain the sensitive identification data long-term. It's merely attested to, often ephemerally, just for the moment of access or verification. This structure fundamentally eliminates the data honeypot risk we discussed earlier. It just sidesteps the entire problem.
That feels like a genuine game changer, a true privacy-by-design solution. It meets the need for verification without creating this massive, dangerous vulnerability. Okay, so verification solved. What about the other big tension point? Parental oversight versus adolescent autonomy. Pillar 2, comprehensive transparency and granular parental controls. How does this architecture handle that delicate balance?
The goal here is quite sophisticated. Provide parents with radical transparency about the environment their child is in and their patterns of behavior, but rigorously protect the privacy of the child's actual personal content and conversations.
How do you draw that line technically? What does the parent actually get to see?
Parents can be given access to carefully curated real-time activity metadata.
Metadata meaning data about the data.
Exactly, not the content itself. So the metadata logs could include things like verifiable usage duration. Your child spent 45 minutes active in the chemistry study group MSN today. Group affiliations, they joined the school newspaper project MSN. Connection logs, they interacted within these 3 specific project groups. And importantly, any high-priority keywords flagged by the human moderators for serious concerns. Things related to bullying, self-harm, dangerous activities, etc.
Okay, so the parent sees the what, when, where, and how much. But where's the line drawn? What remains private to the child?
The line is drawn at the content of private communications. The child's actual one-on-one messages, their contributions within a closed project group, their personal journal entries if the platform supports that all that remains encrypted and protected within the MSN environment. The parent knows that their child is interacting and with whom, within the context of the verified group and for how long, but they cannot read their private conversations over their shoulder, digitally speaking. Unless a trained human moderator, following strict protocols, identifies a serious safety risk and needs to intervene or escalate, potentially involving the parent. It balances the need for safety oversight with respecting the adolescent's developing need for personal space and private thought.
So the parent gets enough info to guide behavior, manage time, spot worrying patterns, but without becoming Big Brother constantly reading their kid's diary.
That's the goal. And furthermore, this framework allows for embedding rules directly into the code architectural guardrails.
Meaning the platform itself enforces boundaries.
Yes. Instead of relying solely on parental nagging or a child's self-discipline, MSNs built on this framework can be technically configured to enforce healthy limits. For example, the software can be coded to only allow access during specific agreed-upon windows, maybe no access during school hours, or it shuts down automatically after 9 p.m. on weeknights. Digital bounds becomes part of the software architecture itself, not just a setting that can be easily bypassed.
That feels much more robust. Okay, this leads us to the final and maybe most fundamental architectural shift: tackling the addiction mechanism head-on. Pillar 3, growth through creation, not consumption, the anti-addiction algorithm.
Yes, this is the complete philosophical and technical opposite of how Web 2.0 platforms are engineered. Instead of designing for endless passive consumption and maximizing time on site,
These platforms are built around what?
they're structured around time-bound, goal-oriented projects and purposeful, finite interactions. The entire system is designed to facilitate accomplishment and eventually an exit logging off rather than trapping the user in an endless loop.
So if the dopamine hit isn't coming from the next random video in the feed or getting likes, what does the system actually reward? How does it provide that sense of satisfaction?
The focus shifts entirely to completion and tangible creation. The platform is engineered to provide progression, validation, and satisfaction based on making things, finishing things.
Like completing a chapter in an online course.
Exactly. Or successfully debugging and running a piece of shared code. Or submitting a finished essay draft for peer review. Or publishing a completed digital art piece to the group gallery. Users gain status, recognition, and that sense of accomplishment from achieving specific, defined goals and creating tangible output, not from passively consuming an infinite, algorithmically curated feed designed to hijack their attention.
That is a profound difference in philosophy. So how does the algorithm work then? If it's not optimizing for screen time and ad views, what is the anti-addiction algorithm optimizing for?
We call it the algorithm of relevance. Its primary goal is to maximize utility for the user in achieving their stated or implicit goals within the platform.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Instead of serving up the next potentially outrageous or controversial video just to keep you watching, this algorithm works differently. Let's say a student is working on a history project within their class MSN and gets stuck on a particular concept. The algorithm of relevance would proactively connect them to the most useful resource. Maybe a specific section in the online textbook, a relevant library article linked by the teacher, or perhaps even connect them with a peer mentor within the same group who has already demonstrated understanding of that topic.
So it facilitates connection for a productive purpose.
Precisely. It aims to connect the user to the right person, the right tool, or the right piece of information they need to advance their project or solve their problem. The metric of success isn't did they click the next thing. It's did we help them achieve their goal efficiently? Utility and completion, not raw attention and clicks.
That connection seems incredibly sophisticated. It addresses the root cause of so much social media harm, the deliberate exploitation of human psychology for commercial gain. This web4.community blueprint seems to remove the motive for that exploitation by fundamentally changing the financial and structural incentives.
That really is the core takeaway from the research. The Australian ban, well-intentioned as it is, tries to put up fences around a fundamentally toxic, badly designed garden. The web4.community framework proposes we stop trying to fence the weeds and instead pave it over and build an architecturally sound, safe, and purposeful greenhouse, specifically designed for young people to learn and grow in prioritizing their safety, their privacy, and their actual development. Hashtag outro. So what does this all boil down to? Look, the Australian ban is undeniably important. It's a signal flare to the world that governments are finally waking up to the real harms embedded in the current Web 2.0 architecture. The addiction cycles, the privacy failures, the constant exposure to harmful content.
Absolutely. It correctly identifies a serious problem.
It does. But the analysis strongly suggests that the tools being chosen, broad restrictive bans enforced by flawed verification, are essentially obsolete before they even start. They fail because they're trying to apply old-world, centralized regulatory fixes to a system whose flaws are deeply architectural and, in many ways, decentralized in their impact.
Right. The research we've unpacked today really provides that crucial pivot. It says the failure isn't just in the platforms, but in continuing to accept their flawed blueprints. Just prohibiting access seems likely to displace the problem into darker corners, while simultaneously creating massive new privacy risks for the very kids it aims to protect.
And the alternative path is clear. The future of digital safety isn't likely to be found in the absence of online interaction, but in the deliberate, careful, systematic design of superior digital spaces, microsocial networks built on frameworks like web4.community.
Frameworks that prove the technology actually exists now to deploy things like decentralized verification and anti-addiction algorithms. Tools that can genuinely serve a user's well-being and protect their privacy instead of exploiting their attention for profit.
Exactly. It's a compelling argument for being proactive, for funding and building the digital environments we actually want our children to spend time in, rather than constantly playing defense against the inevitable harms created by platforms built solely on an advertising model. We've seen the tech can guarantee safety and utility through better design.
It really shifts the perspective.
Indeed. And this leaves us, and you, the listener, with a final, perhaps provocative thought to consider. If these microsocial networks using the web4.community architecture can demonstrably guarantee safety, privacy, and real utility through their inherent design, what would it actually take for the institutions we already trust with our children's well-being, schools, public libraries, maybe community health organizations? What would it take for them, rather than just tech startups or the incumbent giants, to really champion, fund, and maybe even mandate this kind of architectural shift? Could this become a universal public good, a protected space by design?
A really potent question to mull over, especially as we watch governments worldwide grapple with this challenge and as that December 2025 deadline in Australia approaches. We took the fire hose of policy analysis, architectural critique, and cryptography today, and we hope you now have your crystal clear insight.
See you next time.